Have you gotten to the end of your efforts to try to fix this relationship? If there isn't pain that they're in that exceeds the fear and the pain of breaking away from that situation, if they still have hope, then they're going to end up teeter-tottering back and forth with that abuser.
So hope is great. However, is hope realistic in a situation like this if it truly is narcissistic abuse?
If it truly is narcissistic abuse, that partner is not going to change.
You're trying to make sense out of nonsense. We're looking for the signs to stay.
So many women across my lifetime die early because they stayed in a situation that was abusive for them and their bodies shut down.
Some people are going to be listening to this going, tell me what to do. Should I stay or should I go? Welcome back, everybody. I'm so excited to have the narcissistic abuse coach with me. It is Kimberly Weeks. We're going to get deep into the weeds today. And I just want to give a little bit of warning. This is a part 2. We recorded a part 1 with Kim last week. And that particular episode, which will be linked in the show notes, really gave kind of a very good primer of, what's the difference between abuse and narcissistic abuse? How do we spot it? How do we know it? The different types of narcissism that is out there, and really tried to give you guys a good level landscape of knowledge. Okay. Now, today's episode is really the next step. If you listened to the first episode and you were thinking to yourself, shit, okay, I accept that I'm in this, or at least maybe I'm aware that potentially I am in this. I don't know what to do. What do I do next? So today's episode is going to be, what are we going to do next? The warning here, the trigger warning here is, we're not here to sugarcoat what this process is like. This is it's not an easy process. It's a high conflict process. And, I don't ever want to do harm, but it's doing harm if I'm not setting you guys up with all of the knowledge possible on the system that is in place to get you out if that's the way that you decide to go. So we're going to talk about that. But what I really want to start with is in welcoming you back, Kim.
So glad to be back with you, Stacey.
I want to start here. So we finished out our last episode with laying the land, right? Mm-hmm. Now, some people are going to be listening to this going, tell me what to do. Should I stay or should I go?
Yes.
How do you answer that question for people?
That is when people arrive in my consultation room, that is the question. Once we kind of unpack what their circumstances are, that's the question we have to sit with. And the first question I ask clients or potential clients is, have you gotten to the end of yourself? Have you gotten to the end of your efforts to try to fix this relationship? Because if there isn't pain that they're in that exceeds the fear and the pain of breaking away from that situation, if they still have hope, if they still want to go to another therapist, if they still want to try another book, if they still want to try another course, if they still want to ask the spouse what they can do or the partner what they can do to improve themselves and try to fix it still, then they're going to end up teeter-tottering back and forth with that partner, with that abuser. And that partner is going to use that hope to continue to entrap them and hoover them back in. And so I really assess when a client comes or a potential client comes to me, where they are in terms of, are they hoping that that person can still change?
Now, this is where we're going to be down and dirty. Okay. So hope is great. However, is hope realistic in a situation like this if it truly is narcissistic abuse?
If it truly is narcissistic abuse, that partner is not going to change. They are not going to discontinue the pattern that they have. Pouring out love bombing, breadcrumbing, and intermittently reinforcing back and forth, hot and cold, good and bad. They're not going to discontinue the devaluing of that person and eventually discarding and then pulling them back in. That process is going to continue. And the reason I ask that question is because typically by the time someone gets to me, they have been through so many cycles of that they are literally like, I can't take this anymore. I can't deal with this anymore. I am atrophy. I don't want to, some people get into the space of, I don't want to live. I don't want to get up in the morning. I can't get out of bed. I can't function.
Yeah.
So by the time
language I hear is, I'm a shell of myself.
I'm a complete, I don't even know who I am anymore is by the time they get to me. Okay. And they have tried it all. And I did the same thing when I was married. I tried it all. I tried every adjustment, every bit of every time the goalpost moved, I was moving with that goalpost, trying to appease that person. So that's the first place we start. And then the second place I go to, if they have gotten to the end of their efforts to try to get that person to change, is where are they in their functionality, their capacity, their, activities of daily living. Are they eating well? Are they, getting up and moving around? What kind of functionality do they have? Because what they're going to embark on to break away from this relationship is going to take a lot of emotional energy. It's going to take a lot of resilience. It's going to take a lot of determination. They're going to have to advocate for them. So they're going to have to fight their way out of this thing.
I think it's really important that we interject a new term into the glossary, right? So we've talked about a lot of things together. We've talked about love bombing. We've talked about devaluing. We've talked about discarding. We talked about flying monkeys last session, right? Last podcast episode. I think it's really important that we enter into the word of high conflict.
Yes.
If you have a peer, a friend, a cousin, a family member that's been through a divorce, and they are not dealing with somebody that's within the spectrum of narcissism, they could go through a painful divorce process or not. They might even be able to mediate a divorce. When you are going through this, if you want to separate and terminate this union with somebody that's on the spectrum, it falls into a different category. And that is called a high conflict divorce. How would you define the difference, having been through it yourself, Kim, between a general divorce and a high conflict divorce?
Okay, I love that you asked this question because the last session you asked the question between the difference between abuse and narcissistic abuse. And I'm going to juxtapose those two things. Okay. Abuse is the misuse of a thing. Okay. So when you're talking about the difference between a divorce where two lives are having to be separated and people are having to distribute or break up assets, parenting time, they're having to reorient their lives into a completely new way of being, new habits, new location, new spaces. And they're having to go through the pain of and the sorrow and the grieving process of loss, because that's what divorce is. It is what I've described as a living death. The person's still living, but they're dying to you. They're dying to you as a spouse. And you have to shift into different dynamics. Now you all are co-parents. Now you all are, responsible for some kind of relating to each other in service, if you do have children, in service of taking care of those kids. And you all are individually going through a new life individually for yourselves as differentiated selves. A high conflict divorce with someone who is on the cluster B, cluster A spectrum. Someone who is, as we described the last time, has the 5, 6+ quality or characteristics of narcissistic personality disorder. That person, when you leave the relationship or they discard you from the relationship, the goal for them is for you to be destroyed. I do not say that lightly. They want to level you. They want to leave you with no resources. They want to leave you with no support. And they want to leave you. You're already a shell of yourself. But they want to completely extinguish any chance of you being able to move on with your life in a healthy way. That is the difference between a divorce and a high conflict divorce.
And it's interesting. I have an old client, and I remember her telling me she's been divorced 40 years, 30 years, and it still haunts her.
Yes.
That her ex said to her, my mission for the rest of my life is to destroy you.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. Because a narcissist or someone who has NPD does not see their spouse or their partner as their own individual person. They actually see them as property. And if you think about, like, you buy a condo, okay, you may love that condo. You may enjoy being in that condo. You use the condo for your purposes. But when you sell that condo and move on, that's it. Like, it's property. It doesn't have feelings, emotions. You may have memories of it, but you
used it.
You used it, and you can sell it and discard it and go get a new one. And in the same way, someone who is has high narcissistic traits and could qualify for narcissistic personality disorder if they were diagnosed, sees their partner who has been the closest to them, as well as their children, as property to use as they choose. And so if you leave them, if you cause what's called narcissistic injury, which is the rejection of that narcissist or their false reality or their false self or mask, they are going to make you enemy number one. And their goal is going to be to alienate you from every support person that you have, support network that you have, to destroy you in terms of your career and your capacity to earn income on your own, to destroy your health and well-being. And they will use anything and anyone to do it. They will use the court system. They will use your own family and friends that you had before you even met them. They will use your employer. They'll use anything that matters to you or could be of benefit to you to try to sabotage so that you cannot recover. And if I had not experienced this, when people talk about divorce and people talk about the difficulty of divorce, and typically the person who is being smeared has had a smear campaign, waged against them, who is being it's called post-separation abuse, who is now going through post-separation abuse because that narcissist has lost control and access to that person in the ways that they had mentally and emotionally, physically, sexually. People say things like, they'll make these little tropes. Divorces are hard. It could have been worse. At least you got your kids. You need to be able to move on, find out what you enjoy. They say all of these things, and they do not understand that the person is not out of the abuse. It's just become a different version of the abuse.
All right. So I want to address one thing, which is the why. Like, why do they get so vengeful? And I think you said it. It's because they're losing control and they're losing access to that property. Yes. Right? And they don't want anyone else to have it. And by the way, if someone else is going to have it, they want you to be a shell of yourself.
Yes.
Because to your point, the rejection, it's perceived by the offender, the narcissist, as a rejection, not as you surviving and you basically saving yourself. Okay.
It's seen as you betraying. It's a betrayal for you to go on and live. It's an offense, an affront for you to be able to regather, reconstitute, revive yourself and live separately from them and do well. It's actually you like abandoning them. They
Yes.
perceive that as abandonment, even if they're the ones that filed for the divorce. They're the ones that discarded you. They're the ones that rejected you in some way in their thinking, because you're property and you aren't available for use anymore. You have now done the cardinal sin of abandoning, rejecting, offending, and causing them to feel like something's wrong with them for just a split second. That whole thing, they have to then live with the reality that they are not God's little g, that they are not the center of your world, and that you can make it without them. And they cannot, that doesn't compute. It doesn't compute for them.
It's total threat to them.
Absolutely.
Okay. So I'm trying to be as linear as I can for the benefit of the listener. And I'm trying to like predict what they would want to do, like what they would want to know. Number one, just like we were saying, okay, let me back it up. Not that I know you have any like hard research on this, but like, what are the chances? Like, I'm wondering if someone's thinking to myself, well, like, does everybody end up with a high conflict divorce if it's narcissistic abuse? Like, is it possible for me to just go to mediation and for this to work out? And what would your answer to that be?
Well, I'm going to say, yes, you can go through mediation, but that doesn't mean there isn't going to be post-separation abuse.
So that's the next thing I want to talk about.
Yeah.
I know what post-separation abuse is. You know what it is.
Yes.
The average listener does not.
Okay.
So let's talk about what post-separation abuse is. That's going to be part one.
Mm-hmm.
Part two of this piece of that is going to be, and given such, why would I leave anyway? Okay. So number one, let's talk about, and again, guys, the goal here in today's episode is to not sugarcoat.
Right.
This is on a very strong level for me, so important that you hear the truth and the reality of the situation as you go in. It's eyes wide open.
Yes.
So what is post-separation abuse, Kim?
So post-separation abuse, when you break up, whether that is a discard, whether they have broken up with you, dumped you, just literally abandoned you. There are situations where the parent or the couple, one of the partners just leaves. There's no explanation. They just literally pack up and leave, and you don't know where they went, and you don't have any explanation. So there's abandoning, someone being discarded or dumped, or you file and you tell the person that you want the divorce. Once that has been initiated, that communication or that action of separation, everything that happens after that continues the same pattern of abuse in the relationship is post-separation abuse. It's what happens after you leave the relationship.
Okay. So let me, again, because we're not going to sugarcoat, is it your opinion that it's actually in some ways worse?
Yes, absolutely. Yes.
Okay. So let's give an example of that. Yeah.
And here's why. Because when you are in the relationship, the narcissist has, for all intents and purposes, a perceived amount of control and dominance as a result of the proximity, as a result of being in the same location or same home, as a result of you still being hooked with hope. They call it, some people call it pathological hope to them changing, and that you're still committed to working on the relationship. Okay. So they have a perceived sense of being in control of the situation and having control of your mind, your emotions, and everything else, your money, your finances, your body, all of those things. Post-separation abuse, that narcissist is now in a situation of threat because they no longer have the same access and they no longer have the same ability to control and have, influence over you. And therefore, they're in a state of panic. Because they're losing supply. If you remember back to our last conversation, narcissists are addicted to supply. Supply is attention, adoration, your energy, your talents, your gifts, your abilities, your body, your support, your all of those things. That's supply. They are addicted.
And can't supply also be chaos?
Chaos, your reactions.
That's right.
Your responses. They're addicted to supply. And when you separate from them, they are not getting supply from you in the same way. And so they don't have the ability to come in and out. They can't love bomb again and have you loving on them and close to them and all of that. They now have to switch totally into a supply that's negative. Mm-hmm. That's chaotic. Mm-hmm. That's to get a rise out of you. That's to get your reaction or your distress or your degradation or your sense of like helplessness and powerlessness. That's what they're switching into, which if you think about it, in the previous situation, there were at least times that were seemingly good and safe. They seemed good. They were not good and safe, but they seemed it. It was like a lull time. Post-separation abuse, every interaction you have or potential interaction you have is going to be something that's going to try to pull at that ability to get you completely undone.
Yeah. At the beginning, do you feel like there's a little room at the beginning for some love bombing because they're trying to hook you back in?
Absolutely. Absolutely. At the beginning, they're going to what I call play nice.
Yeah.
They're going to look for ways to get you to tell them what's important to you in that divorce process because they want to manipulate that information so that they can make sure that's where they fight.
Yeah. Well, it's important. This is what I would call the weaponization.
Yes.
So if they know what's of most value to you, yes. That's the jugular. That's where they're going to go. Right. And they don't care what the chaos is, what the destruction is.
Right.
A lot of times, if children are involved, they are pawn A number one.
Correct. Absolutely.
So even if this parent has never really actively parented and you've always done it and you've always kind of covered their butt and like always overcompensated so the kids didn't sense that the parent was not involved, or even if this is a parent that just traveled and actually physically wasn't present, mm-hmm. the likelihood they go for full custody only because they know it's your jugular is incredibly high.
Correct.
They could move 3 states away and they're going to fight you for full custody of this child. And it's not because they want the child. Mm-hmm. It is to get the rise, because the rise from you will be the fuel. The other reason why they do it very often is to financially destroy you.
Correct. Yes. And because they don't want to pay child support. They want control of that money. They want control of money. And so, the other thing is, and I think it's important for people to understand this. I tell all of my clients the same thing. We have to understand in this process what the family court system is there for.
Yeah.
Because often when people are going through divorces and they have been abused and they have all kinds of proof, they got receipts, they got video, they got text messages, they got emails, they've got all kinds of stuff that proves that this person has done harm to them in the marriage. Depending on where you live in the world and what state you live in the United States, that could not matter at all. Because the state is a no fault state, meaning you can get divorced. It's nobody's fault. And the court's job at that point is to divide assets and divide parenting time in the best interest of the children or the child.
All right.
So
Go ahead. No, go ahead. Go ahead.
What often happens is that people who have been abused in these relationships go to attorneys and they're trying so hard to make a case that they need to have X, Y, or Z because their partner has been abusive to them. And in the family court system, typically, even though there are laws on the books, that does not matter. It simply does not, in terms of what actually happens in the courthouse. What typically happens is if there has been abuses to children, or if there has been proof of abuse to you. I'm talking a physical hit, a broken arm, a broken leg, some kind of medical record, some kind of police record, something like that. That's something the court will take into consideration. But typically, narcissistic abusers are psychological, emotional, verbal abusers. So there's no proof.
Right.
There's not a smoking gun.
That's right.
And so
I call it psychological terror. It
is psychological terror. But what ends up happening is so many people go through the process of divorce feeling like, okay, I'm going to get my justice. Not understanding that the family court system is not a criminal court. It's not there to protect women from assault. That's a completely different court system. And so we have to understand, when we're supporting as coaches and practitioners, equipping our clients with understanding what they're going to be able to expect when they go through the family court system process. And that is specific to your state, your county, and your country.
Okay. So some people might hear that and go, I don't think I can handle worse. I can't handle worse than what I've had up to this point. And they might even think it's not worth it to put myself through this. Or there's fear. I've had plenty of clients that have said to me, I'm afraid he's going to kill me.
Yes.
And that's either a real or a perceived threat, depending on what they've experienced. And all feelings in the nervous system are valid, people. Mm-hmm. So what do we do? How do we answer the question that I know so many people are listening to, which is, well, if that's going to be the case, what am I doing here?
That's a really great question. And it's an interesting one. I actually prayed for 6 years about whether or not to leave the relationship that I was in. I had 4 children, 4 boys that I was raising. I was an at-home mother. And I went through a long process of debating. And one of the reasons why I ended up filing for divorce was because I felt like I was in a double bind. If I stayed, I was going to continue to atrophy. I was going to continue to not be able to function. My body started having all kinds of symptoms. I was diagnosed right after my divorce with multiple sclerosis. My body was literally fighting itself because of all the stress hormone that I was under daily, hourly. So either over on this side, if I stayed in it, I was going to end up becoming not functional to be able to take care of myself or my children. And I had young children at the time. Or I was going to go through the pain of attempting to get free. And I was going to have to go through the pain of that in order to get to the other side of that, not knowing what my spouse was fully capable of at the time.
Now, did you know this was going to be high conflict? And did you know how broken the family system was when you left?
My family system?
No, the family court system. Sorry.
I did not know how broken the court system was at all.
So it's like ignorance is bliss.
Yeah, I had no idea.
Okay, so now that you know, and this is why you do what you do, so you can support women who are ready to create an exit strategy from the seat of their soul. Mm-hmm. How do you support someone that says, okay, I'm getting sick, not uncommon, guys.
Yeah.
And I don't care if the doctor's like, well, you've got this autoimmune condition. Like, you can't disconnect the two. You have to be able to see that there's some thin thread there. Okay. Yes. They're like, oh shit. Okay. I'm going to dip my toe in, but I don't know what to do. And where do we even go in the sense of, what if someone's just saying, that just sounds terrifying to me?
This is the answer that I give people is we have to pick our pain. You're going to have pain either way. Either way. And I remember being in my counselor's office and my counselor saying, because I kept like crying out, I don't want my kids to go through pain. I kept saying that over and over. And he stopped me and he said, they are already going through pain right now, watching you be abused.
And let's be clear, psychological abuse.
Oh, I went through different kinds of abuse in my marriage. It was primarily psychological, verbal, and emotional, but there were other kinds of abuse as well. And they were being marinated in that environment. And I was being marinated in that environment. And it was a constant state of not knowing what was going to happen, not knowing, if I could function, my body literally got to the place where it was difficult for me to get out of bed every day. There was like an anvil was on my ankles. I couldn't move at times. And so my therapist said, you're already experiencing pain and so are your children. So if you're going to have pain staying or you're going to have pain to go ahead through the process of getting out of it, which pain do you want? And how long do you want them to go through it? And here's the thing. That's what got me. It wasn't that I was I was so broken down that me protecting me wasn't even something I connected with. But when someone told me that if I stayed in this, that I was going to be choosing for my children to have to go through it. That was what woke me up. I was like, wait a minute.
All right. So here we go. Next, I'm throwing all kinds of hot fire to Kim today. Okay. What if you're in this position and or you either don't have children or you have children who are grown and flown? Because what I see very often is this pattern of women that I work with that are in this position where from a young age, they learn the brilliant coping strategy of deprioritizing their own needs to meet the needs of others so their needs would be met. Okay, so we self-abandon in survival to have our needs met by the person responsible for doing it, because there's a sense that if they're not happy and they're not comfortable and they're not regulated, that it's not going to happen.
Right.
And that's an old wiring deep inside the nervous system. It's not even conscious. Yes. You're not thinking it. So you are someone who never puts yourself first. You deprioritize yourself because that's what feels like safety and security in your nervous system. There's no kids in the picture and or your kids are grown and flown.
Right.
So then what?
If your kids are grown and flown, or you have no kids, but you have people who love you and are close to you, you're continuing to go down. If you're in that environment, you are either completely disconnected from yourself in order to be able to stay in that situation. So you are literally walking around as a shell of yourself. Or you are continuing to have symptoms, diseases, illnesses, and an incapacity for you to function fully on a regular basis. And so in that situation, the question becomes, which pain are you going to choose? Are you going to choose the pain of continuing to go down? And I can't tell you, as a woman watching so many women across my lifetime die early,
right?
Because they stayed in a situation that was abusive for them and their bodies shut down, whether it was a heart attack, stroke, a form of cancer, some kind of degenerative disease, some kind of autoimmune disease, some kind of expression of inflammation in their bodies.
That's right.
Where they continue, and they died earlier than they would have had they been in another environment. So you have to choose which pain you're going to choose. Either
All right. Another hot seat question, because again, I'm just thinking of my listeners. All of it makes sense.
Right.
And they're like, I get it. And I believe it. But I got married under God and I shouldn't get divorced. And getting divorced is not something that I feel is allowed to me because I made this commitment. And I know you're a woman of faith.
Yes.
So how did you resolve that within yourself? Or how do you help your clients who are, you know, deeply in alignment with their church and their church community? That point that's so important to them.
That's a really great question. And that's probably why it took me 6 years of debating whether or not to stay or to go. And I spent time reading my Bible and I spent time praying and I kept seeing the word love and sacrifice, protect, life. There's a scripture that says that God came to give us, or Jesus came to give us life and life more abundantly. And I could not square what I was living in and what the Bible was telling me God wanted me to have. And I started, you know, researching and searching and looking up scripture and looking at books. There's a beautiful book called Life-Saving Divorce or Life-Giving Divorce by Gretchen Baskerville. Beautiful, beautiful book that describes all of the biblical principles and supports for divorcing someone, even in the Old Testament, which was the first books of the Bible. But I got to the place where I was talking to God so much about what I was experiencing and the death that I was feeling. I called it death derivatives, anxiety, depression. Like I just felt like I was all the symptoms in my body, my inability to function, my inability to process information. My brain was getting all scrambled up. I literally was like, God, this cannot be what you describe as life. This cannot be the love that you talk about pouring out to me and that you not only have for me, but that you are asking my husband to have for me. This just doesn't go together. And I literally started to pray and just ask God, what do I do? What do I do? And I can remember, I tell this story all the time. If you've ever been to Krispy Kreme and you know when the hot sign comes on and it flashes and you know that means that there's warm donuts and you look for that hot sign, I would pray and I would literally be like, okay, God, can I go? I kept asking, can I go? And that sign didn't come on. It was a no. It was a no. Like I had this feeling like no. At the time, I had just had a baby. So I had 4 kids and one was a brand new baby. No, year after year. And one day, again, I'm crying out to God and I'm praying and the Krispy Kreme sign changed. And it went from no to go. And I literally picked up the phone. I called my parents because I didn't tell my parents anything about what was going on. They could see some things, but I didn't tell them anything. I picked up the phone. I called my parents. And the next day I had an appointment with a divorce attorney. So for me, my faith, I wanted to align with the life that I was living. And this relationship that I was in and the environment my kids were in did not line up with what God was leading me to and teaching me about in the Bible. It just didn't line up and it was incongruent. It was another thing that was incongruent in my life. Because for most people who have been abused, you go out into the world, to your work, to your job, to your church, to your friends, to your family, and you are pretending that you are okay. You're putting on a false mask. And that partner puts you in a position to be a part of their fake world, their fantasy world. And then you start putting on a mask too. And then you go home and take it off, cry yourself to sleep and can't move. So I say all of this to people who struggle with that question because many women come to me feeling like they don't have permission to live to live. They don't have permission to thrive. They don't have permission to advocate for their safety, their freedom, their wellness. And I'm here to tell you that that is a lie. And that is the lie that people buy into underneath this manipulation and this control and dominance that comes as a part of narcissistic abuse.
Thank you. Thank you. And I'm saying thank you to you on behalf of my listeners, because I just know this is such a complicated, complex, very layered situation. You've been beat down psychologically. You're not thinking straight.
Yes.
You deprioritized yourself. Your body is falling apart.
Yes.
You're trying to make sense out of nonsense. This is my mother saying, you're trying to make sense out of nonsense.
Yes.
And you're looking for the signs. And it's really, this is what we have, that cognitive bias. We're looking for the signs to stay.
Yes.
And then we're looking for the signs to go. And we're questioning ourselves. And we're, maybe I'm the problem. Maybe I'm the crazy. Maybe I'm the issue. Because that's what they're telling you, by the way. You're the problem.
Absolutely.
Okay. So it's all bubbling to a surface.
Mm-hmm.
We've covered all of the hot seat questions, right? Mm-hmm. Because these are the questions people want to know. These are the sticking points.
Can I say one more thing?
Yes, please.
One of the things that people continue to say to me from a faith perspective was that God hates divorce. That's in the Bible. It is a scripture. But I also want to speak and say God hates abuse. I had to replace that God hates divorce, because he does. He hates abuse that leads to divorce. Mm-hmm. Hates the misuse of a thing, which is what abuse is. Relating and connecting and coming into what they call a covenant or a life relationship with someone and a deep connection with someone is not supposed to be misused.
Right.
It's not supposed to be abused. Someone's proximity and closeness and intimacy and access to you is not supposed to be misused. And that's what these situations are. And so I had to replace that with God hates divorce. God hates the abuse of a person that leads to divorce. That is what he hates. He put spouses in the position to be able to submit to each other, to partner with each other, for a husband to protect a wife, all of those different things. And I just want to say that because nobody ever said that to me. So this concept that I'm going to be doing something against God if I file for divorce or if I get divorced was not true. It simply was not. And the truth is in the proof. And the proof is, what do you feel like when you're out of that person's influence? And I can only speak to you from my own experience that since I left my marriage and got divorced, my life has been more life-giving, fulfilling, joyful, evolving, expansive. I haven't had any MS symptoms since 2018. My body has been repairing and repairing. My mind has been repairing and repairing. And I got to the place with a flare-up where I couldn't walk anymore. When people spoke to me, I couldn't comprehend what they were saying. There are parts of my brain that couldn't take information in and then process it or be able to communicate my own thoughts. I mean, there was all kinds of damage as a result of being in that kind of situation. And I can only tell you that on the other side of going through what they call clean pain, Rest Maimonican calls it clean pain, the pain that produces, life for you, that, and I'm feeling all kinds of feelings right now because I don't doubt one day, not one, that was the best decision I ever made for myself and for my kids. My kids are doing so well. And it's because they are in a home that's safe,
Right.
They can have an expected peace where there is support and nurture, where they're taken care of well, and there's not volatility that they have to walk on eggshells around.
We covered in episode 1 the lay of the land. We covered in episode 2 some really important hot seat questions that are the obstacles in the way of making a decision. I could do a whole 3rd episode on then how to leave.
Yes.
And the exit strategy and how to navigate this landscape, which is going to be more than 15 minutes. And I try to keep everything between 45 minutes an hour. Would you be willing to come back for one more episode to talk about the exit strategy?
I sure would, because I want to make sure that also that we cover the different elements of post-separation abuse. There are some specific elements that if you don't understand what to expect, it can really take you off guard. What I try to do with clients is give them the armor that they need, the expectations that they need, so that they are not continually shocked and going through like being completely off kilter and having the rug pulled out because they don't know what's a part of this process, and it's pretty systematic and has pretty much the same elements every single time.
Yep. I love it. What would you like the listeners' biggest takeaway to be from this conversation?
That they're worth it. That their life is worth it. That it is possible to recover. That you can. One of the things my therapist kept saying to me is, you have choices. One of the things that environment of narcissistic abuse does is it puts you in a position where you feel like you are powerless and that you do not have agency to make your own choices. And I want people to hear that they do. They do have choices, and you can literally choose your way to freedom. And support is available. Resources are available to help you get there, but it's absolutely possible for you to come back to life fully. But in order to do that, you got to get out of the situation that's making you sick.
Thank you so much. I feel so strongly this is such an important series of conversations to have, because the number of people that I have coming to me, coming through me, that I'm presented with, they're all experiencing the same thing, and everyone's getting the same playbook.
Yes.
And it's just so important. And I just really want to give time to that post-separation abuse, that family court system abuse, the post-divorce abuse. And I just think each one of them needs its own, because there's just so much to it. So thank you for willing to come back a 3rd time. And guys, if you want to know more about what Kim does, Kim, what is the best way for people to learn more about what you do?
The best way for them is to go to my website at thenarcissisticabusecoach.com, or to find me on Instagram at I am Kimberly Weeks. I am actually actively right now launching an online transformation space for women to help them heal from toxic relationships within community, and to have the support and resources to navigate this exact process that we're talking about.
And where can they find information about that program?
What I want them to do today is called Stand Firm. It is the Stand Firm community. What I want them to do today is I want them to reach out to me on Instagram in my DMs. I will send the information for them to get signed up. We're actually enrolling founding members right now. And our full launch is June 1st, 2025.
I love it. Thank you so much, guys. Stay tuned for episode number 3, where we will talk about post-separation abuse. Take care.